Mark, you were there when players and executives spoke for the first time since Sarver announced he was beginning this sale process. What stood out to you?
Well, first of all, Malika, I've been covering the NBA since '99. I've been to a lot of these media days, and this was the most dour, the saddest media day that I have ever attended. It felt more like a funeral.
Look, we all knew there was some trouble in Phoenix, but did we know it was this bad? Because after falling one game short of back-to-back Western Conference Finals, and after their best regular season in franchise history, the Phoenix Suns have gone from looking like one of the most tight-knit and motivated groups in the NBA, to the point where people were actually mocking them for being a bit too enthusiastic, to now having their media day compared to a funeral. A funeral. And it wasn't just one journalist either, because Brian Windhorst echoed those statements by saying, I quote, "I have covered Media Day for 20 years. I've been to 10 or 12 teams as different media days. I have never been to a media day that has had the absolute absence of enthusiasm." And a lot of people will point to the disastrous Game 7 against Dallas as the reason for the Suns seemingly collapsing from within, but I think it goes a bit deeper on and particularly off the court. And before I even talk about the worst human being in the world, no, I'm not talking about Bossman 99. Before we talk about the clown that is Robert Sarver, or talk about the potential issues the Suns could have on their hands with Chris Paul after he finished the series against Dallas with practically his worst string of games ever, the relationship between Phoenix and their max contract center doesn't look ideal.
How have you and Monty kind of been able to move
I haven't spoken to Monty. No, I haven't spoken to him at all. Ever since the game.
So not even.
No.
Are you happy to be here, Deandre?
Yeah, I'm alright.
Yeah, not exactly great to hear that not only has Ayton not talked with Monty Williams at all over the offseason, but he also doesn't seem exactly excited to be back in Phoenix. And this feels like it could really reach a boiling point, because this isn't just a result of last offseason, but the souring of the relationship between Ayton and the Suns extends back to the year prior when Sarver and Phoenix refused to give Ayton a max, in which Ayton responded by saying he was disappointed and felt as though he wasn't getting the respect he deserved. And then fast forward a year later, he was benched in Game 7 of the playoffs before again not being offered a max contract by Phoenix. But it gets worse, because after Phoenix hadn't offered him any kind of contract, once Indiana offered him a max contract, the Suns swooped in within hours and matched that contract, only for the whole time Ayton and the head coach to have had no conversations about the contract, his role, what happened in Game 7 of the playoffs when he got benched. It doesn't look great, does it? That's just the Deandre Ayton situation. And again, before we talk about Robert Sarver, let's talk about what the Phoenix Suns could look like on the floor. Because let's not get it confused, if Ayton plays, they still have a very talented roster. Now, like I mentioned before, there has to be some concern over a 37-year-old CP3 that averaged 9 points a game over his last 5 games against Dallas. Now, I'm not foolish enough to say he's washed or he's going to fall off, because people said that before he went to Houston, and they were proven wrong. They said it before he went to OKC, and the same thing happened. Oh, and then when he went to Phoenix. Basically, whenever Chris Paul looks like he's about to fall off or decline, he seems to get better. But there is a chance at 37, he needs to take a step back as a playmaker in terms of minutes, maybe rest a few games, which could leave the opportunity for Cam Payne, Frank Jackson, and I think potentially more importantly, a big silver lining could be the opportunity this gives Devin Booker to be more of a primary ball handler. Because last year in the 11 games CP3 sat out, Booker averaged 28 points, and more importantly 7 assists with multiple double-digit assist games. I mean, just watch this cross-court pass off 1 foot while trapped in the corner, or how about this in-transition lob to Macau, which was just perfectly weighed. We've seen it with James Harden, who actually averaged very similar numbers his first few years in Houston to what Booker's put up over his last 3 or 4 seasons. We saw when he got more responsibility, he turned into a complete offensive engine, or even on a lesser scale, the likes of Bradley Beal and Fred VanVleet, who have increased their assist numbers. I think we should expect to see Booker take a playmaking jump. How much of that will depend on how much Chris Paul still has to do with this offense. Now, as you can probably tell by the title, this video isn't all positive, because not only does Deandre Ayton look miserable in Phoenix, but there is a player who has been very vocal in his desire to be traded, and that's Jay Crowder. From a basketball sense, I don't think this is a huge deal because Cam Johnson is probably a better player. At the very least, he's a clearly better offensive player that might not have the same kind of grit and size defensively, but he's no slouch on that end of the floor. But when it comes to Phoenix, having the likes of Crowder leave and then having to replace his 20 to 25 minutes a night with someone new could just throw off the cohesion a bit. Something that has been a staple of Phoenix's offense has been their ball movement, has been their shooting, and then defensively, it's been their communication, it's been their rotations, and Crowder fits that mold perfectly. Not to mention, he provides some leadership as well. So for him to leave, maybe from a production standpoint, it won't be missed, but it could make an impact, because once you have Crowder wanting to leave, and then if the relationship between Ayton and Monty Williams is souring, or between Ayton and any of the other players, all of a sudden, that cohesion looks a little bit worse. Because if we've learnt one thing over the last few years, chemistry is huge. The Lakers have a ton of top-end talent, and they didn't even make the play-in. Or how about the 76ers, the Nets? And then on the flip side, the Celtics, the Suns, the Warriors, the Bucks, the Grizzlies, all these top teams have been a result of chemistry as opposed to just having such superior talent. And this is without even mentioning the issue that is Robert Sarver. Having to deal with this situation is completely unfair for the playing group and coaching staff, but unfortunately, that's the reality. And the reality has undoubtedly taken a toll on these guys, with the likes of Devin Booker and James Jones saying that's not the Robert Sarver they know. And trust me, I'm not saying that as a way of defending that clown, but I'm just saying some of these guys would have had decent relationships with Robert Sarver, or even if they didn't, still having to deal with this and the uncertainty that comes with new ownership or whatever happens to Robert Sarver is just another thing that they have to worry about. Now, what I will say is it's not all doom and gloom for the Suns. It certainly looks like it could hit a breaking point, but this is still a team that won 60 games and does have multiple players that still have room to grow. I talked about Devin Booker. Deandre Ayton should realistically be the second option on this team, but for obvious reasons, I have no idea if that's going to come to fruition. But even guys like Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. I mentioned Johnson, but I probably didn't do him justice, because in the 16 games he started, he averaged 16 points, 5 rebounds on damn near 50, 40, 90 shooting splits. He's not just okay, he could be a fantastic offensive piece in an improved role. The same goes for Mikal Bridges, who averaged 16 points a game post-All-Star break, showing some improved self-creation, even some flashes of playmaking off the dribble at times. But it's one thing to have talent and guys that can produce, it's another thing for senior NBA journalists to say, this is the worst media day they have seen in 20 years. I'd say that's not ideal. I think it's going to take quite a lot for Phoenix to get back to where they were. Now, if you did make it all the way to the end of the video, a like would be greatly appreciated. Subscribe to the channel for more. Have a great day. Bye.